was so terribly inefficient. I got an hour spent researching one phone call.
Yeah.
My day's over. That's not a scalable.
All right. You know what time it is. Biggest mistakes.
To I don't know, pick a couple. Like when you got going, because we were talking. Like I can remember my first deal. I remember my first deal, but like you can't because you're like it was like a month. So it's like, what was that first month like?
Dude, I was hungry. Our friend Les Brown says, you got to be hungry.
Yeah.
And for me, as I was like thinking about, what was my biggest mistake? What was my biggest fear? I think it was probably like the unknown.
Right.
Because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just calling people.
It's scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's on the other side?
Hey, you got a house you want to sell? Hey, obviously that was not what I was saying.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like, I didn't even know what I was going to do if somebody said yes. Right. And I know that a lot of people that we talk to, you may be watching this, maybe feeling the same kind of way. Like, I didn't know what I would do if they're like, yeah, I do. Great. Let's have a conversation, right? So, I think the biggest mistake that I hear or find that most people make is just having that fear of unknown. And
what was the mistake you made, though?
Yeah.
Being afraid of the unknown?
Yeah. I was afraid, but I think the biggest mistake that I made in that first month was just not negotiating the right numbers, right? Like we have that motto, like no big deal attitude,
right.
Trust the process. Know your numbers, and I didn't know my numbers, and I was literally like, "Oh, it says online that it's 100,000. Can I do it for 80? Mm-hmm. That's not a deal, I didn't know and understand the whole concept behind the percentage has got to be this because your buyer's buying at a percentage of this, and there's rehab. Like I didn't know that.
I think there's a science to this.
Yeah, I mean, my first month was me cold calling for sale by owners and like people's signs that I seen in yards as I drove back and forth from the library to my hiding spot. I was sleeping in my car. I didn't know.
Right.
And so in that moment of yes, which happened 23 times. Only 5 of those 23 times was it even worth considering. And there wasn't a lot of extra money made on those because I didn't know.
Right.
But each time got closer and closer. And I love what you always say to our Academy members, which is shoot your shot.
Right. Yeah.
Because that was probably the strongest suit.
You just kept shooting.
I was just shooting. I don't know what the heck I was doing. So that was probably the biggest mistake that I made that first month because they don't really remember that first deal. Mm-hmm. A second mistake, if I had to pick 2, Kyle, would be like going and meeting the person and spending the time in person when you can do the same thing over the phone. Yeah. So that way for efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. I remember going to the very first house and I got this really cool, like you've seen it, that belt buckle. I've got this belt buckle that's got 2 rattlesnake heads on it that is like stereotypical Texans. And I got that in the backyard of this house.
You find some cool stuff when you go to these houses.
Who would have thought? I mean, for all I know, it was some Wild Wild West cowboy, that it was in the backyard and it came unearthed. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the guy's like, you can have it. And I'll never forget. I kept that as a trophy and told myself, I am not walking these properties. I didn't want to meet the person again. Like, I just put up these walls.
It's so funny because, I loved that. I love, but it's like, everyone's got a different style.
Yeah.
Because, but you're right. It is more of the more you can accomplish over the phone, the more efficient you're going to be.
Yeah. And that's where, it is, but it isn't a mistake. But if I had to put my finger on too, is one, just shooting your shot. Like the most people that we talk to fail to just shoot their shot. And mine was, I didn't know my numbers. I had no.
See, I knew my numbers too well. I was the other side.
Yeah.
I probably knew more about the property than they did before I called. And so it's like, it was one of those where it was like, I would shoot my shot like once a day because it was like, I would research a property I would know everything about the neighborhood before you thought that I lived there by the time I called. So it just was so terribly inefficient. Because then the thing is too, is like we would go walk a property So now I'm at like trying to get around to Dallas.
Yep.
I got an hour spent researching one phone call, and then about 3 hours, like 2 hour, an hour there and an hour back.
An hour there.
Right, yeah. So it's like my day's over. Like that's not a scalable.
Well, and we talk to people all the time that are just like, oh, I'm running my numbers. And I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes you can make.
Right.
Like just have a conversation, because if you don't and you do that, and obviously we know better now, but that's years of experience. Right. And so, I mean, those are two big mistakes. It's like not knowing your numbers and not shooting your shot that we made. Mm-hmm. And we want to encourage you guys not to do the same. So,
cool.
Yeah. I was trying to look on there.
Flip your sleeves out.
Fix your shirt, bro.